everyone. This is Chelsea, and I am here today with Shauna Kabatsnik. Shauna is a speaker and a strategist who specializes working with teams, individuals, and leaders. And I'm so excited to have you here today, Shauna. Welcome to the show.
I'm super excited to be here. Thank you, Chelsea, for having me.
Yes. Shauna, when you and I have been talking, you shared with me a story about how you moved here to the United States from Ecuador. Can you share how that happened? Because it's important for the audience. Yeah, please.
In my perspective, so the short version of it is my father was American Jewish, and I'm Ecuadorian. My mom's Ecuadorian Catholic, by the way. And in the summertime, we would come here. We would go actually to Connecticut for vacation. And this time, though, when we came to Connecticut for vacation, he informed me that as much as he loves me, my vacation was going to come to an end. And I'm like, what do you mean it's coming to an end? And he said, I started the process of enrolling you in Mississippi State University. And you got 3 days. We're going to get your stuff ready. And I'm putting you on a plane and you're going to Mississippi State. And to be honest, it took a while. You know, when someone shares something and I actually thought, is this a joke? That was the first thing. I was like, what? This is not a funny joke. But I could tell in his tone of voice that, you know, this wasn't a joke. So I processed it as best as I could. I've never been on a plane by myself. So I knew some English, of course, because my dad was American, but Spanish was my first language. And off I go. And I'm there. He set me up with someone, a professor that helped me for the first few days and put me in the dorm. And that was it. That was my beginning of a brand new journey.
Oh, wow. And had you ever been to Mississippi or the South before?
No. So there's a couple of things that's so funny you asked about that. Never been to Mississippi. Actually, when I asked my dad to show me where I was going, he opened up the map and he was looking at the map. He was looking at me. He looked at the map. He looked at me and he couldn't find Starkville because it's such a small little town, right? And this was back in 1990, 89. So he looks at me a little confused. He goes, well, Jackson is here and it's pretty close to Starkville. And I looked at him and this is what I said, and I still remember he's Jewish background. I said, so you mean to tell me that you're sending your firstborn to a college that doesn't even have a dot in the map? I wanted to play that guilt, you know, part, but no, it didn't face him. He said, that's correct, and you're going. So no, and I still remember flying over Mississippi after the change of plane, and it was a little single engine or something, little bitty plane with 10 passengers, and I'm like, what is happening? And flying over cotton fields, and I've never seen cotton fields before, but I remember that sense of sadness because in Ecuador, one thing that we have is mountains. We're in the middle of the Andes. I grew up in Quito and we're surrounded by mountains, and I'm flying over a place that was so flat, completely flat. You can see everything everywhere. I mean, that I gotta tell you, that impressed me. That impressed me. Now, of course, once I got there, met people, but my initial reaction was like, what just happened here? My life was turned upside down in about 2 days, you know, give or take.
Yes, absolutely. And then when you were at school in Mississippi and going into this environment, did you feel like you belonged right away, or what happened there?
No, absolutely not. I think that's where it all hit me because in Ecuador, I didn't fit in all places, not Ecuadorian enough, not American enough, not Jewish enough, not Catholic enough. but I still found my little bubble, the kind of friends I hung out with, the places we went to. Um, Going to college for anybody is, of course, a big adjustment, right? But then to have switched over my primary language to English, and then to have all these different assumptions made of me because I didn't look like anybody else. And my accent, I mean, there was so many things, and I definitely felt like I don't belong here. And I felt very defensive because of the assumptions people were making about me, until I had to change my perspective. And it took a little while, but I had to decide, am I going to be defensive? Am I going to be offended and react that way? Or am I just going to understand that they don't know? And if they don't know what they don't know, I need to be able to step in there and say, no, actually, I'm not Mexican. And yes, I am legal. Whatever questions they come up with, which I was like, why don't they know this stuff? And explain where I was from, or explain my background, or yes, we have running water, or whatever, and take it as, let me just help them understand. Because the truth is, I didn't know their culture either, right? So I need to come from that place of, I need to learn from you as well. So it was a shift.
Yeah, shift, from what I'm gathering from you there, Shauna, a shift to openness. And like you said, a change of perspective. And when you were open, I bet it opened others to shift as well. Do you remember?
Yes, well, it did a couple of things. It changed the dynamics because I no longer felt so offended or so defensive, right? So I just let that go and took it for what it is. They didn't know. Maybe the questions could be phrased differently. And now when I go out and speak on diversity and inclusion, that is something I say. Your question can be phrased in a different way, so it doesn't come through as attacking, or the other person doesn't get offended, but it comes through as a true, genuine question, like, I really want to know.
Yes.
So it's the way that you ask. But what happened is, by me not being so defensive, it was almost like I was more welcoming, and I was more accepted. So it did definitely change the dynamics of how I interacted with my students, with the students there.
That's great. And then, Shauna, how did that impact you going forward in your career? Because I know that you worked in a lot of male-dominated industries, like most of them are. So I want to hear about that. How did that impact you going forward?
A couple of different ways. So I guess my father, I must tell you, of course, I was very mad at him for this. I thought he didn't love me. He didn't want me. All this stuff goes through my head. But now I realize that he knew better, right? He knew he would have never put me in a position like that if he didn't know for a fact that I would be able to handle it. So that made a big difference. So as I graduated and moved into, I went into banking and different industries, I started to just take ownership of who I was and stop apologizing for who I was. I'm not saying I'm perfect, because it happens, right?
Yeah.
Then when I came into that male-dominated industry, which was the financial services industry, it was very challenging because as women, I think sometimes we feel that we're not quite good enough. Or maybe we second guess ourselves. I know that it's changing, but back in 1995, well, when I started financial services was actually 2008, but which is another story.
Yes.
Yeah, you heard 2008, right? And you're
Yes.
like, what?
Yes.
But I had to just own who I was, even though I felt defeated, even though I felt like I didn't belong. I was very fortunate though, and I share this with friends, I share this when I do training, is find a mentor, find a peer, find someone that's senior to you that you can relate to, that is there for you. Because trying to go into industries like this, trying to be in sales and not have someone there helping you through, it's challenging, it's hard, and you're going to second guess yourself. And then you add that factor of you being a woman. Now, not only was I a woman, but I was going through a divorce. So I was a single mom, I was a woman, I was Latina, English, all these aspects. And I remember two sides of this. I remember the side of someone telling me that I didn't belong there. Obviously, a man letting me know I seemed like a good girl, but I didn't belong there. And, I might as well, for the sake of my kids, quit while I was ahead. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm going to show him. I remember now that's where the Latina in me came out. I'm like, oh, no, don't tell me I don't belong here, right? But then I also had an amazing mentor. And I would use me being female or me being Latina or single as my excuse. So whenever something happened, I'm like, oh, come on, give me a break. I'm a single mom. Or come on, this industry doesn't like women, or whatever it was. And at one point, he just looked at me. He's like, I want to tell you this one time, and that's it. And I'm like, oh gosh, here it comes. He goes, you can either keep using this as a crutch, or you can use this as what moves you forward, as what motivates you. And these are the things you have that are good. These are the things that you have that, in spite of, not only are you succeeding, but these are things you can share with other women. These are things that your clients will see. These are things that other women in the financial services industry can be excited about, because you're showing them it can be done. It's your choice. Which one is it going to be? So I guess I got my heart to heart, and then, the rest, the rest happened.
Yes. Well, and you chose yourself. And
I did.
And tell me, when you say, Shauna, owning who you are, what are some of the things that you've done to own who you are?
I think the first thing, honestly, was, I hate to say this, but it was divorce, right? And unfortunately, I had to come to that place to say, I need to be a better person. I need to be a better mother. And I can't do that if I am not the best me. So that, and I do not endorse, it was very hard, but I had to step into that place and say, I need to do this for the sake of my kids, which a lot of people say, but for the sake of your kids, you could stay married. I said, no, because I was becoming a very mean mom and a mean person. And that's not who I was. So you have to go back in and say, what is it that's missing, or what is it that I need so that I can be the best version? So, and now moving forward, as you can tell by my little logo, moving forward is, I knew that all women were fabulous. I knew that if I could step into that, women can too, but they needed that little reminder, right? And they say that sometimes you do things because you need them too. So as I was building other women up, as I was telling women that were going through a divorce, you can do this, we're going to work on your financial plan, it's going to be okay, I realized I was giving people words of encouragement that were also encouraging me. And that just was a pattern. I know that when you find that why, what is it that moves you, it can transcend in whatever you do. And I was empowering other women and helping them step into it. And by doing that, I was stepping into who I was.
And through that journey, Shauna, do you consider yourself a leader?
So that's an interesting question. And I will tell you, yes, but I don't think leaders I did not step into that role, just like I'm an influencer, right? Leaders, you've got to be able to lead without saying I'm a leader. So
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by that is when I was in the financial services industry and all that, and of course I was not. I was a top producer and I did my job and whatnot. I didn't realize though that there were other women in the organization, other financial advisors that by just me helping them and empowering them, I was leading, right? But I wasn't an official leader. I did not have the leadership title. It was just by the things I was doing.
Yeah.
When I created Fab Women and it started to grow, that's the sense of people started looking at me
Mm-hmm.
as a leader. And once we grew and created a membership, but I didn't create that. I stepped into it because that's what people saw. Now, once people see that, back to owning it, I
Yeah.
have to step into it, right? Because I could say, you see that, but I don't see that, and I'm running away from it. Or you can say, you know what? Enough people are saying this, that this must be true. This is what they see. I need to be able to see that in me.
Mm,
And then I started to evolve and start making decisions and start acting as a leader and fall into that space.
yeah. And some of the early mentors that you had, you were talking about the one mentor. Are you still in contact with those mentors, or have you developed new mentors along your path?
Both. So yes, one of my mentors, we're definitely in contact. He is fantastic in financial services, but he actually has a business doing custom made suits.
Oh,
So I got my first custom made suit in red, of course, red and black, and beautiful suit. And he did it. So he was a sponsor of one of my events. I had his suit, and it was really funny. And this was, 10 years, 12 years later, so yes, he's still a friend. And as far as new mentors, absolutely. When I stepped out of corporate,
mhm.
which I was working at a bank until 2018. Wow, it's only been
Oh,
a couple years. It
yeah.
feels like longer.
Yes.
You've got to be able, as an entrepreneur, you've got to be able to have mentors, coaches, somebody there that's been there, done that, gives you solid advice, because if not, it becomes very noisy. And
Mm,
you can get stuck into that area where you get buy into online courses, buy into all these webinars, look for people to help you, listen to all these different voices, but not accomplish anything because you don't have a go-to person.
mhm,
So
mhm.
yes, I have some really good coaches, friends, and mentors now.
Yes, wonderful. And you've touched on Fab Women, and I want to give you an opportunity to share how you created it and what the vision is.
So I created it organically. It was definitely not one of those things when people say, "Oh, so when did you think of this?" I'm like, I really didn't. It actually, the story is funny, is I was a speaker at an event, but the lady that was putting on the event didn't have the audience, didn't know how to put an event, didn't even have a name for the event. She decided we're going to create it together. So long story short, we call it Fab Friday. And fabulous has always been one of my favorite words. I just love the way it sounds. In Spanish, it's fabulosa. So
Mhm.
it sounds almost the same and it just has a good feeling. And I believe that, right? So we call it Fab Friday instead of Fabulous Friday. And it was about 10 ladies that we got in the room. And there was someone else there with me. I had barely met her and the other speaker. And after the event, the ladies asked, when is the next one? So
Mm.
when is the next one? One of the ladies answered, oh, we're going to have these every month, every second Friday of the month.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, what? So it was, and I realized that what I loved about financial services, what I loved about what I was doing in any time was when I hosted workshops, when
Mm.
I spoke to crowds, when I got people, when I educated. And that was the best part. The part of meeting paperwork and all that, that really was not my favorite, right?
Yeah.
So it was an easy move. And that's basically how Fab started. Fab Women started with an event that eventually grew, that had more people. And then I started charging a very nominal fee. And then people started to ask me, how do I belong? So for people out there that are trying to start something, don't jump in with both feet until you know there's a need, right? And I think sometimes we miss that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the value of having a coach.
Yeah.
Mary Foley is a very good friend, and she's my business coach as well. Or she was my business coach at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And people start asking, how do I belong? And I started going, belong to what? Just join, just pay for the event, right? And Mary's like, wait a minute. And we had a coach say, she goes, if people are asking, there's a need. I did not see that need because in Richmond, there's a lot of women networking groups, a lot. But there was a need. We were providing something different. We did not focus on leading with the business or the product. We focused on the relationship and on the experience. That's what leads fab. So long story short, that's basically what happened. And it started to evolve and it started to grow. And I'm glad to say that now we even have systems in place where something like this happened through this whole thing with no live events, where other groups might be struggling a little bit and adjusting, trying to do some Zoom meetings and things like that. We've already had online membership. I have members in Canada. I have a member in Phoenix and one in Washington. Actually, I have a member in Seattle.
Great.
She's a marketing director. She's fantastic. So we already have some things in place, which is really cool because if you can be ahead of the curve, when things like this happen, we were able to pivot a little bit and adjust.
Yeah. And because we're recording this in April and it will probably air next month in May, I'll be clear that we're talking during the pandemic. And that's what you're referring to there with the shift to online.
Yes. But you know what? This is so funny. And I know you call it pandemic, but I so hate that word. It's just, I want it gone, right?
Okay.
But what's interesting with what's happening is we have found that this works, right? Because for Friday, our live event is normally between 40 and 50 people. And my concern was, oh no, we're going online now, what? Well, as of today, which is Wednesday, we have about 35 people registered. Everybody paid like they normally would on a live event. So I noticed that the leadership does too. And I'm like, what if we were to do something like this every couple months? So keep the live events, but add this to it, because a lot of my online members, even though they're able to see the event via live stream, now they're able to see us. Now they're able to interact with us. So they're excited because they're getting to know us at a deeper level. So through changes, either you decide to learn from it and adjust, and what are you learning that you can take with you? Or you can pout and cry and, think that everything is falling apart and get stuck in whatever this is.
Yes. And there's something here that I want to share, take away from what you're sharing here, Shauna. So your coach had said, if there's a need or people are asking for it, there's a need. And then you talked about how you took initiative and how we're in this situation now and you're taking initiative and you're creating it into an opportunity. So for the women and underrepresented people who are in corporate, what would you advise them if they want to advance their career and they're not sure how to do that? What would you advise them?
It depends on the person, because I'm very bold, and sometimes I'm too much, or I've been told I'm too much. But I would advise is first take ownership of who you are. And if a woman's in an industry or a career and they want to advance, then they already have that in them. Yeah. Because there's also women that are perfectly comfortable with whatever they're doing, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. They're happy, they're content with their role. But if there's other women out there and they're like, I'm looking to grow in this career, I'm looking to move up, I'm looking to change departments, you already have it in you. You just need to own it and step into it. And maybe is taking that conversation to a manager. And again, depending on the setting, depending on who's around you, but you've got to be able to step out of your comfort zone. You've got to be able to say, if this is something that I have, a need that I have, then I need to be able to voice it. Because if not, what happens is, and it's funny you asked this, because I get hired sometimes for team building, right? Or women empowerment in male-driven industries. And it's, what happens is if you don't do something about it, then you start being resentful. Then maybe you're not doing your job at the best that you can because you feel defeated. And I'm saying this because these are the things that happen to me. And if you start feeling defeated, you start losing that oomph and that focus that got you moving, right? So I knew, for example, with me, when I started in financial services and I started first with insurance, I knew that I wanted more because it was no longer fulfilling. It was no longer exciting. I needed to find what is the next step. And I'm bold enough that I went to my supervisor and said, okay, I know I'm good at this. I know I'm doing this, but I want more. What does more look like? So the best advice I can say is step into it and ask, because sometimes you won't even know the answer if you're not brave enough to ask. And with that being said, you also have to be brave enough to know that if they say no, or this is the best you can do, or you find another job, you've got to be able to play those what ifs. This happens. Now, Peggy teaches me on the what if, and she's like, why don't you think what if you're going to get that contract? You're going to do this, turn it into the positive, step into that, but know that if there's a pushback, then maybe you're not meant to be in that space at that time. I know it sounds a little bit rough, but that's honestly what I believe.
Yeah, that makes sense. What else would you like to leave the audience with, Shauna, as we wrap up here today?
I love what you talk about, which is courage, right? Corporate courage. I just a thought that, especially because, my focus is always women, is courage is a good thing. Actually, courage is good for everybody. It just seems that men tend to step into it a lot quicker and faster than women do. So I would say be proud of who you are. Know that you are fabulous, fearless, authentic, and bold, and have courage to take that next step, whatever that next step is, because it can lead you to something really amazing on that other side.
Thank you so much.